Welcome back to the latest ITESOFT Insider View. This episode, once again, I have Jamie here with me from VAT IT. Delighted to have you back again. Thank you for joining us. You may remember last week we were looking at specifically how the automotive industry is affected and how real benefit we can give to them there. This week we're going to look specifically at Brexit and changes to legislation that's affecting the finance sector. So big topic.
Big topic at the moment.
Exactly. So Jamie, where are you in VAT IT with Brexit?
I think the first thing when we hear the buzzword Brexit that we're all fed up with is just there's still uncertainty. We're still in a transitional period at the moment where ultimately people looking for answers and giving you answers, that's not the right advice at the moment. There's uncertainty. We're in a transitional period. Legislation is being formed, and therefore the main thing for our clients and the comfort we give them is we have people that are constantly on top of what's happening and looking at the impact of that on our clients. In terms of the impact, there's a couple of areas just to get you guys thinking that I'd like to touch on. Obviously note that nothing's firmed down yet in law, but things to keep an eye on is, first of all, one of the biggest things in terms of the movement of goods, of us having this community within the EU, the freedom of goods moving within the EU, including the UK. Now, that is going to change. How it's going to change hasn't been finalised, but essentially for the UK to bring control back to their borders, they're going to have to put controls on goods being imported in and out of the UK. Now, that follows the movement of goods and therefore relies on the destination country. Now, that can depend on that coming into the UK or back out. But at the moment, until the UK strikes trade deals to sort essentially what's going to happen with that out, we are in a period of uncertainty that we're on top of, but there could be really big implications for companies moving goods and the impact on the indirect tax consequences of the movement of those goods. So that's sort of the first thing.
And I think that's a really key point. And I guess the really important thing here for people looking at yourselves and at ourselves is to say, look, actually, whilst we don't know what's coming from a specific legislation perspective, we are dealing with lots of customers working in the global environment already. And so whilst the impact of this on a lot of UK companies is going to be big, there are lots of companies that already exist and already working in a global way. So whilst they're not affected by whatever the ultimate decision is going to be, between the UK and Europe, they are already having to deal with this sort of situation if they're already dealing with countries outside of the EU. And so whilst that support is going to be needed by our customers, we are already providing solutions to global organisations and customers dealing in a global way where they've got tax being charged on goods coming across the border into the UK already.
And that's the knowledge and expertise that's there, it's just applying it to a new legislation.
Exactly that. So I think, for me, I think the message I'm keen to get across to people is, it's going to be a change. It could be a big change, but it's not as scary as it could be, because this is not something that's so fundamentally new that no one knows what to do about it. Whatever the ultimate decision is, it's going to follow a pattern that's akin to something that already exists.
And we are there to support our clients in combination together through all aspects.
Exactly. So what else do you see it as having an impact on?
So you have this EORI number. So at the moment you have an EU EORI number that's a requirement. That's an economic operator registration and identification number. Now, what HMRC in the UK have stated is that actually you might now need a second EORI number, a UK EORI number. So just companies that have that EU EORI number, just thinking ahead now, make sure that you're taking advice and that you're set up in the right way so that you have that UK EORI number in place. So that's another quirk that's happening that might be an impact, as well as actually specifically needing a fiscal representative in that foreign country that you're doing business. So already Belgium and Greece have come out and said, well, you're going to need to have a fiscal representative in our country if you haven't had one before, and that's something that obviously we can help companies set up with on an international landscape. But that's something that as more and more countries might take that up. But Belgium and Greece specifically are two countries that already have explicitly stated that.
Okay, good. And what else is there from your side on this one?
It gets more and more exciting and better, so I hope you're enjoying this. So at the moment, let's say you have a business from one EU member state incurring expenditure on their accounts payable side or their travel in another EU member state. Now it was formerly called the 8th Directive. It's now got a quirkier name, but essentially that's the mechanism in EU law that enables you to legitimately claim from, say, that foreign tax office if it's a service-based cost, or applying that reverse charge concept, which enables one party to account for the output and input, which drives efficiencies in that tax landscape where we're within the EU community. Now, essentially what may happen is that the 8th Directive is done all online through a portal, and the 13th Directive, which drives the non-EU to EU flow of transactions, is what might happen to the UK. Now, those claims are still paper-based. We're waiting for, if you're listening, our global tax offices to all start adopting the ability to do it through an online portal as we're moving through this digitisation, but we have to work with the tax office requirements, and if that's a change, we're in place where, as you said, we service companies already from the non-EU into the EU, so we know how it works, and we can assist clients and really understand then how that's going to impact their processes in terms of taking things from that digitisation automation flow back into a compliant claim where you still might need paper documents, but the invoices that are compliant could still be held within the accounts payable system. So we're set up and we can work with our clients to make sure that they're not going to be losing free money from foreign accounts payable transactions with that change in mechanism that may happen.
Yeah. So I guess what's important there, as well as obviously making sure you're on top of the legislation, is also making sure that you've got a process that's adaptable and flexible, that's going to enable you to move with what's happening, and that's where automation and to your business process can really help and make a big difference to you. And I think the other thing you touched on there was around digitalisation, and whether this particular directive will still be paper-based or be digital, but what we're also seeing is a move across Europe around digitalisation of tax anyway. So here in the UK, we've had the introduction of the Making Tax Digital legislation.
Spain with the SII requirements, the live reporting.
Exactly that.
Italy as well have adopted. So that's
exactly. So this whole clearance versus post-audit, do you have to report your invoice to the government before you give it to the supplier, or do we do VAT reclaim afterwards? And all of that. Now, you've done some analysis of some of the Making Tax Digital stuff and the impact that's had. Where is it at the moment?
I think for phase one, which was the initial phase, and I think the government were aware that there was going to be a transition period into that 10%. There was a 10% take up from companies that needed to. That's just purely 10%. Wow. As high as that. As high as 10%. Exactly. So, no, there are companies out there, and like, you're not alone if you haven't adopted yet, because I think the main message is people are scared of change and scared of moving through into automation and digitization, and actually the best way to drive that change is through legislation that makes it mandatory, that forces people to just go and adopt and do it, because you could otherwise sit waiting and actually move through it. And if there are challenges that you'll have a provider that's there, whether us and you, to help consult with them over those changes and assist and guide them through that process, where then at the end they'll very clearly see the benefits of the efficiencies in their processes through automation.
Absolutely. And I think what's critical for people here is that the solutions they're putting in place are compliant. Here we're seeing legislation. Brexit is going to bring changes to legislation, unknown legislation changes, and what's important is your solution has got that flexibility and adaptability to give you that digitalisation in a standardised way, which is brilliant. We've got a webinar coming up shortly from ITESOFT, so have a look at that. It's going to look a little bit more around some of this clearance stuff and how it works. So we can, if you're interested in that and want to know a bit more, please do. Back to Brexit, because I think we should finish where we started. Are there any other kind of key things that you want to just bring for people's attention?
I think in terms of what I discussed, those are the key impacts. The other thing I didn't mention is these long distance selling thresholds around the EU for your e-commerce sellers. Now, that could be something that's removed that automatically triggers an obligation to have to register, and country where essentially you're conducting and making those e-commerce sales into that previously you didn't have to register. So that's something else from the e-commerce side, and if you're a client that's involved in that element of work, like, please get in touch so we can make sure that you're structured compliantly as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, we've done a very, very quick run through today. There's an enormous amount, as we said, of uncertainty, of legislation, of areas this is going to touch on. If you want to find out some more, please check out our websites. So ours is itesoft.co.uk and Jamie's is vatit.com. So please look there. You'll find a lot more information in this, a lot more detail about what the implications are, and constant updates as more information comes out and the governments and the trade negotiators help to move this forward.
Absolutely, and don't be scared of Brexit. It's something that's happening, and when you have people like Nick here from ITESOFT and VAT IT, like, we're here to help you navigate that landscape. Do not worry, just get in touch. The earlier the better.
Absolutely, brilliant. Thank you once again for joining us for this episode of ITESOFT's Inside View, and we look forward to spending another one with you in a week's time, where we're going to be looking at the pharmaceutical industry and some of the benefits that industry sector has been able to gain through the use of VAT IT and ITESOFT. Thank you again.